Mayor Emanuel is now throwing what might be called a Hail Mary pass, going to court to try to save the Lucas Museum here in Chicago. Deborah, is that a fight worth waging?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's very disheartening when you look at Mellody Hobson and her commitment to Chicago. She's an ambassador for this city, and to be in this position to have to fight for this opportunity that will bring about jobs, it will bring about a new experience for inner city kids to visit this museum. I think it's a fight worth fighting for.
Well, the question is, though, why was there a fight in the first place? I mean, this is the second city where she and her husband, George Lucas, have chosen a site that they knew was going to be difficult. It was federal parkland at the Presidio. It's now protected lakefront land here in Chicago. So I think really it's, why isn't there another site that's more acceptable to them? Why is this the only site? If we want to bring folks who are from the South and West Sides that really want to experience this, cultural icon, why not choose a site that's maybe closer to them, farther away?
The difference here may be that Lucas is putting in a lot of his own money, $740 million, in order to jumpstart this. It isn't. Mayor Emanuel said there's precedent. The Adler Planetarium was built by Max Adler, a rich Chicagoan back in the 30s. So should that make a difference that he's putting this kind of his own money in?
There are a lot of ways that this can work. The Lucas Museum should not be a financial Death Star for the city of Chicago, right? Lucas has deep pockets. The Disney company, which owns the Star Wars franchise, has deep pockets. And there are a lot of potentially very enthusiastic private investors who would love to be involved in a partnership around this. So there are a lot of ways it can work without reliance on public monies. And in terms of the actual land, for the museum to be located on the south side has huge benefits. It can form a bookend to the museum campus with the Museum of Science and Industry and the Obama Library, say in Jackson Park, and providing a huge magnet for jobs and opportunities and visitors and so forth. And Friends of the Parks, in terms of the site, Friends of the Parks has actually been an Obi-Wan Kenobi and a Yoda for their mission. They have used the Force for good to protect the magnificent lakefront that so identifies Chicago.
But the question is, what did they really protect, right? Did they just protect the parking lot?
Absolutely. That's my opinion. I actually live near the facility. The thoughts of having it there, I think it would be, nice for the community. And I do believe that it's just a parking lot. I mean, when you talk about Friends of the Parks, when you look at this opportunity, again, to your point, to bring in inner city kids to this, neighborhood, to have this experience, to, be in a position to see the city in a different way, why not? And I look at it as a parking lot.
I hear a lot about bringing kids from, the South and West Sides down to downtown, and I wish we would think more about bringing downtown to the South and West Sides. I mean, the Friends of the Parks has been there for 40 years. It is an institution that protects the lakefront. I think it's more than just protecting a parking lot. It's actually protecting against business as usual. We've seen since the 2015 elections that people in Chicago aren't happy with the way that things always have been. I mean, I can't be the only person who was waiting for bulldozers to show up on the lakefront, because that's how we used to do things. And I'm glad we're
talking about
past that.
The Meigs Field destruction under Mayor Daley.
I mean, that's not a distant memory for a lot of people. And so I'm glad that we've actually moved past that, and we've thought about kind of different ways of tackling these
The
things.
mayor did propose a compromise. After the original lawsuit, he suggested tearing down the old McCormick Place and actually adding more parkland to the lakefront. Is that compromise a reasonable one? And did Friends of the Park blow it a little bit here?
Well, swapping a building for another building does not seem to be that big a stretch. It would seem that Friends of the Parks could accommodate, a compromise like that. But there are some interesting legal precedences regarding landfill and what is in the land and who does that belong to. If you just look at the history of Sue the T-Rex at the Field Museum, and it was the fact that the bones were in the land that called into play laws regarding land usage. And Friends of the Parks could use a very similar argument, even though it's just a parking lot.
Though the McCormick Place idea depended on over $1 billion of actual public funding,
Right.
it required a compromise in Springfield, and we haven't seen a lot of compromise over Springfield in the last few months.
Last point here, Mellody Hobson, who's, of course, a Chicago financier and the wife of George Lucas, said that, quote, this process has been co-opted and hijacked by a small special interest group. Does she have a point?
She has a very valid point. And I just go back to my original point. I think it's really disheartening that she's, provided so much, love to the city that she's from and so much support, and to be in a position like this, it's just heartbreaking. And I do think that, you know, when you look at the bigger picture, it's not about her, you know, her reaping the benefits. It's about her providing an opportunity for our city.